Welcome to episode 3 of the Bass Guitar Worship Blender podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Bass Guitar Worship Blender podcast. This episode, I've got 2 segments. I actually had planned out 4 segments and actually have 4 segments already recorded, but I decided to give a little bit more time to my interview with Dave. Dave is on a forum that I'm on, and he had a really interesting post, interesting for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. He got aged out of his church, and that, of course, caused a lot of controversy on the forum that we're both on, because a lot of people weren't very happy with the fact that he got aged out for good reason, and good reason that they were outraged, not good reason that he got aged out. But so it created a lot of in-depth discussion about age on the platform. And so I ended up giving more time to that interview since it was such an interesting conversation with him and an important conversation as well. So that means I've got 2 segments already banked for the next episode. So that's good. And still, even just with 2 segments on this episode, it's still a lot of cool information that I think you'll like. And other than the interview with Dave, I've also got for this episode, I've got another where I basically, with my bass in hand, kind of go through some more technique and some kind of learning application type of thing. I want to make sure every podcast has at least some type of music application where it's not just people talking. I want to make sure it's also playing and showing you things on the bass and kind of helping to develop people's skill set on the bass as well. So I had kept that segment in there, and that's a segment on octaves. And I know last episode I did a segment on octaves, but this is a completely separate thing. Last episode was a segment on octave slides, where this one's more about actually playing octaves and working octaves into your runs, your playing, and kind of making your parts more interesting. So anyway, that's this episode. We're going to go ahead and start off with my interview with Dave, and I hope you enjoy it.
An interview with Dave, aka at Exalt Bass of TalkBass.com.
About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was on a forum that I watch regularly online with Talk Bass. It's a forum that's actually for worship bass players, and it's a really cool forum, and I spend a lot of time there. And one of the people on there, his name is Dave. He posted something that was really interesting, and actually, to be honest, it kind of stirred up a lot of people. It was something that when we read it, we were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what we just read. So a lot of people had a lot of good input to say on this particular topic that Dave posted. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Dave, and I'm going to let him kind of tell you what his experience was and what he had posted. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to ask him a few questions. So thank you, Dave, for being with me today. Go ahead and tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, and then kind of get into the experience that you had with a church that you're at.
Sure. Well, my name's Dave, and I've been a bass player for 55 years this last September, of which time probably, I don't know, almost probably 30 years or more I've played in a worship setting. I started out my experience in worship settings in the late 60s, back in the mamas and papas go to church kind of movement. At college, I was a bass player with a singer-songwriter, and we did a lot of services. It was off-campus church, but it was still, that was their target audience. We recorded an album. It was somewhat successful, did some touring and things like that. Then I got into my rock career a lot more seriously, was full-time musician for another 15 years in the secular thing, and then raised my kids for a few years, and then got back into church, and I've been into it since then. I've been a worship leader. I've been a worship member. I've been just playing bass primarily for all those years. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. So what specifically then happened to you that that's basically the reason why we're talking right now?
frankly, the thing is that I am getting old.
Are we all?
You know, at least on the outside, you know, and on the inside I still feel like, you know, a 30-something, but I can't, I can't make it look right from the outside. And the church I was playing with happens to really be successful with attracting a younger and younger crowd. The church has been kind of changing the dynamic as they get more successful, and they're kind of I don't know, setting themselves up in the Jesus Culture Hillsong, that type of a kind of a mode, but even with a more of an EDM kind of a style. And ultimately, I had been on schedule for a couple of years, and I looked at the summer schedule this last springtime, and I noticed that I wasn't on the schedule. And typically, I usually am scheduled about 6 or 7 times. I was their number one sub. I was the person they'd call with 2 or 3 days' notice and say, "Hey, you need to memorize these songs and be at rehearsal Thursday night," and I could do it. So it see me not on the schedule was really kind of shocking. I called up I texted the worship director of music and asked him what was going on, and he said, you know, that hey, why don't we meet for coffee, you know, the following week? And I went, oh boy.
Yeah.
So we met and we had coffee, and I was told that basically I was not going to be on the schedule any longer, that they wanted me to move to another role of possibly coaching.
Okay, so what was the specific term that they told you?
He basically just said, I'd like to talk to you about moving you to a different role that isn't going to be an active on team member, but you're going to be possibly coaching in there. They have an onboarding program where the new people come in, they audition, and then they have this longer period where they go for a couple months of getting together and coaching, kind of getting them to learn their system and how things go. And then at the end of that, there's a cut, and whether or not some people make it, some people don't.
Right. And I'm all for that mentoring aspect of it, but I guess... But for you, I guess they were saying, as you had mentioned on your post, you were saying basically you kind of got aged out. Yeah,
that's really what happened, because, well, they had their next onboarding class, and I wasn't asked to not only was I not asked to mentor in that particular session in the summer, but I also was never contacted again. So I really kind of felt I was like, okay, you know, like, well, I told you that there was no problem with me. I accepted it just fine. I thought he presented extremely nicely. He handled it very professionally, very complimentary. You know, but I just felt kind of kicked to the curb.
Right.
Aged out was kind of my term that I used for it.
Okay.
And luckily for me, there was another church that I was recommended to play for as a substitute, and that would happen right around the time that I found myself not on the schedule, and I've been very busy with them, playing 2 or 3 times a month since then, filling in. So at least I'm able to contribute. I'm able to worship in the way that is most natural to me, which is as part of a team leading worship.
So you have plenty of experience and plenty of ability as a bass player. So it really was simply because you were getting older that that basically you got moved more into a mentoring role.
That's right. You know, I did not look the part, and he mentioned that, you know, while we were talking, you know, and the thing is true. I look stupid in skinny jeans. My legs are, you know, very short. I'm overweight. You know, my hair's gray. But, you know, hey, I can play. And I've got good gear. I've got pro gear. I was willing to continually invest in upping my gear in order to make sure that I was able to keep up with with requirements of what they were looking for.
Right. And I'm getting up there in age too. I'm in my 40s. So luckily, I'm on a team where we've got people of all ages, all the way up to pushing 70, all the way down to late teens or early 20s. So, I feel, me personally, kind of feel that's how a church should be. They should be multi-generational. And, anybody who has the ability to serve should be able to serve, because really, whether you look good in the skinny jeans or not, which in my opinion, probably nobody really looks good in skinny jeans, but it's not about how we look or trying to have that cool factor, trying to be a rock star. It should be honestly about people with the giftings and the talents to be able to serve.
And I agree with that. And if they would have utilized me at Thursday night rehearsals, but they have 3 teams that rehearsed every Thursday night rehearsal, because they have multiple locations. They're all in this singular at the mother church, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And if I would have been, they did have people coaches who would move from room to room and listen to what's going on and comment about what's going on. I was never brought into that cycle at all. So,
right.
If I would have been used, I would have been, kind of sad, to have reality smack me in the face, but I would have accepted it, and I would have been saying, okay, this is, I guess, the way I'm going to have to serve, and I'm okay with that.
Right. And
he also did mention, by the way, that I did know that there was another player that this had happened to. He's actually a friend, so I guess I kind of knew that it might happen to me at some point. It had happened to him a couple of years before. And he said that they were going to be kind of doing that to a lot of the older players. They were going to be not scheduled as much. Mm-hmm. And I'd noticed that they have not been scheduled as much.
Right. And, I've been to some larger churches as a visitor, and, churches with over 1,000 people, and have noticed.
Well over that.
I'm sorry?
This is well over that. They're usually 800 to 1,000 per service per location.
Okay, so a large church, and I've noticed that with a lot of those big churches where it'll be a giant church, but everybody on the platform looks like they're under 30. And
30 and under.
So it really seems like that's something that's, it's not just, specifically a situation that you've experienced. It's something that I think a lot of people are experiencing as we're looking more and more to try and make the worship team appeal to the younger crowd, so we can bring in that fresh blood, so to speak, to kind of reinvigorate the church. But I'm just wondering if there's a danger there in alienating other age groups by just trying to be so focused on youth. Do you think that there's a danger in that, or if we're still involved in the mentoring, is it still?
I think it depends on how they handle it. Mm-hmm. But yes, I think there is kind of a danger. If the church actively engages the older people in a way that is kind of feeling integrated with the church, I think it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. If they, like with at this church, they have a senior group that gets together once a month, and they have like a potluck and then a little kind of a service. Mm-hmm. But they do it they're kind of stuck in a back auditorium. Their stuff is just kind of, they're almost like a small group, but mm-hmm. they're not, you know. And it's a nice group, good people, but it feels like you're like a different church kind of using somebody else's location. Mm-hmm. In the service, if you go there is a wide variety of people, but I do notice that the age has changed over the last couple of years, so there is less and less of the mix of generations that we typically do. Their youth group is gigantic. Mm-hmm. Their junior high school and senior high school kids, they get them to combine their 500-600 kids who show up on a Wednesday night.
Wow.
Then the youngers are even more plentiful. So wow. There's a very successful outreach for the age group that they're looking for, and so far I think they have enough millennials with deep pockets and seniors and older people who are willing to contribute to kind of keep their expansion going.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like, though, with a lot of big churches that instead of just focusing on the younger crowd, having maybe a rotation of different worship teams that play from week to week, or somehow mixing it up a little bit more, where maybe you can have your young group play one week and maybe your older group play another week, and then a mixed group playing another week.
They did have rotations. They had multiple bands in rotation, and I would be called to sub in at various locations depending on, somebody got sick or somebody's on vacation or whatever. And I was playing, their sessions are 4 months long, and I was playing an average of 6 to 7 times a session. And for most of the part, about half of them were pre-scheduled because of somebody knew they were on vacation or whatever. And about half of them were just spur of the moment.
Okay. Well, and we'd already kind of touched on, the onboarding and the mentoring and the behind the scenes. Is there anything else that people 50, 60 plus years of age can do to still stay relevant on the platform and be able to support their pastor's vision for the team? Is there anything else that we can do in these instances where, people are moving towards that younger worship team?
I really wish I could figure that out.
Yeah.
It's, if I could, I'm a short guy. If I could make myself be 6 foot and skinny and look good in the skinny jeans, I could probably dye my hair and wear a hat or something and fake it for a while. But I'm just, that isn't me. I thought the feedback I got from players on the team was always very positive. From people in the congregation, I know I did a good job, and that was the feedback I got. And I think that, honestly, the director of music, I think that this did not come from him. I think it came from upper leadership, and the combined senior pastors, or I think they were more directing it than the actual musicians themselves.
Right. Now, one of the things too is we're talking about, being aged out, but at the same time, a lot of churches obviously they have youth groups, and those youth groups are a lot of times led by other youth members that have musical ability. So is there kind of a reverse thing going on here where we're kind of, teaching the youth that they need to be, that it's a more of a rock and roll kind of experience, and that this is kind of like a cool band, so that when they graduate from the youth group, they kind of have this expectation of what the main sanctuary worship should be like?
Actually here is, I think they were starting to develop some youth musicians, but typically they would put together a worship team comprised of normal active members to play for whatever they had for a youth event. But if they would have had a youth band and would have said, "Hey, Dave, we need you to come in and coach. They got a couple bass players who want to get in here. Could you help them out?" I would have been more than happy to be involved that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I've always wanted a mentor, and I think sometimes I come across as intimidating, so I haven't really gotten the opportunity to help too many people over the years.
Right. Yeah, and I'm huge on mentorship. I think that we should have more ability for the more experienced older musicians and singers on the platform to be able to work with the younger group. And also, even though we're talking about kind of being aged out as a bad thing here, at the same time, I also am all for the older experience being able to step out of the way at times and to allow the younger talent to have an opportunity to play and to worship on the platform. So I think for me, it's kind of trying to find that balance of what's the right blend and how to keep everybody involved. One of the things because I'd found out about this on the forum that we're both on, and a lot of people had a lot of great things to say in response. One of the people had said, "I've gotten my best spiritual growth from people older than me," and I think that's so true. That's where a lot of our wisdom comes from. And so I really hope and pray that all worship teams, all churches are not aging out people or thinking that they no longer have any value, that everybody in a church that has talents has something to bring to the church and to.
Except for the very my first experience, which was it was a college age band, leading worship. But other than that, at all the church experiences we've been multi-generational, where the age spread within the worship team has been 25 years or so, and or more. And I've rarely been the oldest person on the team, and I've never been the youngest. But I think I do bring a wealth of experience. I mean, I was a full-time professional musician for, 16 years. Played thousands and thousands of gigs in a variety of settings, variety of different bands, different types of music. So I think I have a fairly decent skill set that I bring to the mix, and I know that I was able to contribute, even in this last band at rehearsals, with subtle coaching and I especially with drummers about how to relate to bass players.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too. I mean, I don't know of any. I can't think of any other ministry in a church where it's so age specific. I'm trying to think of another area where somebody might actually get aged out in another ministry in the church, other than youth. Obviously, they're going to get aged out there, right. But I just can't think of another area.
I was shocked, when it happened to me. I guess.
Yeah, well, you've taken it really well. You've said some really great things, and definitely haven't shown any bitterness towards it, which I think is very, very good. The right spiritual thing to do. And do you have any?
My wife had a hard time with it, though.
Yeah, I understand that she did, which shows that there is a ripple effect to that aging out, where you're not just impacting the one person that you've aged out. You're impacting other people as well. Family members.
Yeah.
So
one of our children, our son, is a senior pastor, and when he found out, he was like, "I hope you're not going there anymore."
Yeah, yeah, and
well, we aren't, but it was a sadness. It was a loss.
Right.
We had a lot of friends there,
right?
And, so now we have not found a new comfortable home church for us, and so we've been visiting one that is a decent fit for us on Sunday, but not in the week.
Right. Well, you're still having some opportunities, and it's obvious that God's still making some opportunities for you, and I think He will do so. I mean, He always makes the lemonade out of our lemons, so I definitely know that He's going to use this for His glory.
Somehow, sometime.
Yep. Well, is there anything else that you want to share with us, Dave?
Hey, thanks for reaching out. I really appreciate it, and I've enjoyed your podcast.
Okay, great. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining us, and looking forward to talking to you again. As indicated, that interview was prompted from a post that Dave had did on talkbass.com under a forum group that we're all a part of. And if you're not a part of that forum, I highly encourage you to be a part of it. It's called the Praise and Worship Band Bassist Club. So it's a separate little club right within talkbass.com. And there's over 1,500 people that are a member of that group. So it's a large group, and there's a lot of regulars in there that are posting, and a lot of good information that's being shared on that forum. There's 3,500 pages worth of posts already on that group page. So highly recommend that you be a part of that forum if you're not already, since, hey, it's a forum about bass players that are on worship teams. So it's definitely something that you'll find interesting, and a lot of great people that you can meet there. But when Dave had posted that he had been aged out of his church that he was a part of and playing with, it grew a lot of frustration and a lot of feedback from a lot of people on the forum, obviously, because a lot of people were pretty outraged by the fact that a talented bass player like Dave was let go just because of the fact that he was getting a little bit older. And I won't mention all of the posts there, but for example, some of the things that people were saying, this was something, and I'm going by their forum names, not their actual names. Somebody whose forum name is Megan's dad, he writes, didn't fit the visual. What's next from them? Not thin enough, not blonde enough, too short. Sound Support One writes, and they're actually quoting another source, and I don't know what the other sources, they didn't provide that, but they were quoting another source that said, young people give life to the church, middle-aged people run the church, and old people pay and pray for the church. And then Sound Support One goes on to say, you ever been to a church that's only one age group? An entirely young church is superficial, an entirely middle-aged church is boring, and an entirely elderly church is hopeless, and depressing. So basically indicating that it takes all age groups to make a church interesting and worth being a part of. And we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. It doesn't matter whether one of us is 1 year old or 100. We need to treat each other as all equals and all part of the same family. You would never kick a family member. You don't say, hey, you're no longer my dad because you got too old, so I'm going to get a new dad. No, you don't do that. We're all family members. We should always be a church family that stays together and prays together. I'll finish off with saying what I wrote on the forum when I saw Dave's post was, everyone who has a gifting and a willingness to serve should be utilized. Every church should be multi-generational. The worship team is a great ministry to have different generations work together. Old musicians should mentor the younger and give them opportunities. Younger musicians should learn from the older. If it becomes about excluding some that aren't considered cool, it seems like that's becoming a new breed of Pharisees.
Segment 2, Using Octaves in Worship Music.
Last episode, I talked to you about octaves, but I think I probably called that segment wrong. I shouldn't have called it a segment about octaves. I should have called it a segment on octave slides, because that's technically what we were talking about, was when you're playing one note and you slide up an octave to the octave note higher up the neck. Where today I'm actually talking about octaves themselves. So, for example, when you heard that introductory music, the little bumper music coming into this particular segment, you heard that's actually using octaves, where if I played it without octaves and I just played it straight, it would just be. So the octaves gave it a little bit extra pick me up, so to speak. Those octaves, they kind of give it a little bit more funk, a little bit more movement. Makes it sound a little busier than it really is, because it just adds a little bit more movement to the music. So in that regard, octaves can be a lot of fun. Now you're probably thinking, well, where in the world can I fit that in worship music? Now if you're doing gospel, then you probably got plenty of room to fit some octaves in. But on your traditional contemporary worship music, you're probably going to be a little bit more limited. You're probably not going to be able to do too much in the funk arena there on your bass guitar. But you can still use octaves. There is still a place to use them, and it's something important to learn and know how to do on your bass. And it's not that hard to learn. It might be a little weird on your fingers the first few times you do it. But the quickest and easiest way to kind of get the concept of octaves into your muscle memory, into your mind, or your thinking and your playing, is to just take your first finger on your left hand, place it on a string. Right now I'm just going to hit a B flat. And then with your pinky, play the octave higher by going up 2 strings and then going 2 frets towards the bridge of your bass. So then up to 2 strings, and then 2 frets. So this would be your first finger. This would be your pinky on your left hand. Kind of like a little disco-y octave thing going on there. So that's a good way of just kind of practicing octaves. Now, that's not the only way to play an octave, but that's, if you're starting out with octaves, that's the first thing you want to just kind of practice to kind of get a feel for that. And with your right hand, you're probably wondering how you're doing that with your right hand. Some people, well, a lot of people that I see, will use the same finger on their right hand, where I tend to do my first finger on the root, my middle finger on the octave. So if you looked at my right hand, it's alternating between the first and second finger. Okay, so let's put this into action. I'm going to play just a very simple chord progression that you might hear in a worship song, and just, your typical 3/4 chord worship chord progression. Something along the lines of this, something that would be kind of slow. So pretty simple, right? So what you could do with octaves, maybe that's a verse or whatever, chorus on the song. Maybe first time through you're playing it pretty straight, but then maybe the second or third time through you want to kind of start adding a little bit more to it. So you might do something like this. So you can actually fit some octaves in that case. I'm doing some things where I'm actually dropping down an octave instead of going up an octave. Most people just think of, okay, I got the octave, now I'm going to go up. But in the case of this note here, I'm first hitting this note, and then the next time on the downbeat, doing that lower octave down. So that's one cool way that you can use octaves on slow songs, where you can walk up an octave, walk back down. I'm also, I drop down again an octave to do the fill back into the root there. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. I'd mentioned about in the left hand doing the first finger and the pinky on the octave as being probably the most common way to kind of get familiar with how to play an octave. But let's take a different chord progression. I'm just going to move to the key F here. And I'm playing an F, and I'm on a 5-string bass, so I'm playing the F on let's see, I'm on the 8th fret of the A string. And so I'm playing the F with my middle finger on my left hand on the 8th fret of the A string. Now, a common thing when you're playing in a key, a lot of worship songs use the 1, 6, 4, 5, or the 1, 4, 5, 6, or they're using some combination of those 4 chords. And if you're wondering what I'm meaning by the 1, 4, 5, 6 and all that, I'm just talking about chords that are built off of those scale degrees. And if you don't understand that at some point, we'll talk about that on the podcast as well. But a lot of times you might be on the root. You might walk down to the 6, which would be the D. And so if you're in this position, you're playing with your middle finger here. Now you're playing with your first finger on your left hand on that E, and then the walk down leads you to where your pinky is on the D on the E string on the 10th fret. Now, if you want to play an octave off of this note right here, if you're playing along here in your head, visualizing this, or even if you're actually playing along with your bass, you realize I'm on my pinky right here. How do I now get to an octave if I'm already playing with my pinky? Well, this is where you got to then do something a little different. And the way to do that is hit the right note. That's what you do. I overstepped there. So what I did there is I just actually jumped 2 strings, and on the G string with my first finger in my left hand on the 7th fret, I'm playing the octave D there. So I'm jumping over 2 strings, landing on the G string on the 7th fret with my first finger in the left hand. Now I go back to the E string on the 10th fret with my pinky. So you've got that. If you were to play the arpeggio of the chord, you can see, okay, I see how that works, because if you're playing the arpeggio starting on your pinky right there, you can see that you end right there on the octave higher with your first finger. So that's how you get that octave jump in such what seems like a weird way the first time you play that. And it'll take a while of practicing that to get where you can utilize that octave in that position where it's natural and it works. But that's what practice is for. And so another thing, too, is we've now talked about 2 different ways of playing the octave. There might be a time, too, when you want to say we're going back, we're on key F again. We're on the F with our middle finger. And we might want to then do an octave. So instead of doing the first finger on the left hand, we're doing the middle finger on the left hand and the pinky. So you see how it's we're just basically, you want to make sure that you're able to also play an octave from your middle finger to your pinky, because there's going to be times when it'll make more sense based on where you're going with the song. So that would be a third way to practice, because you're going to want to go back to the first finger to the octave instead of the third, and so it's a little weird. But once you realize, I see how I can go from that middle finger to another part in the song and keep my positioning on the bass correct. So being able to do it that way will be helpful too. That's episode 3 of the Bass Guitar Worship Blender podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I want to give a special thanks to Dave at Exalt Bass at talkbass.com. Thank you for your time, Dave. Thank you for sharing with us and just being truthful about your situation and just giving other people a lot to think about, and hopefully something that will help alert people of what's going on with age on the platform, and it will help maybe get some discussions going in some of those churches where that's happening, or where people are thinking about doing that type of thing in their church. So thank you very much, Dave. Really appreciate it. If you find this podcast is helpful or interesting, by all means, definitely definitely subscribe to it. And if you could, also leave us a review on iTunes. If you don't like this podcast, then don't even pretend like you didn't hear what I just said. So anyway, that's this episode. Hope you'll stick around for the next one. God bless all of you. Thank you.